So a little birdie had contacted me of sorts about a birthday coming up for a dear friend of mine by the name of Red Nova Tyrant. And I just so happened to have been tasked with a very specific job of repaying such a wonderful thing he did for me so long ago, of doing an Asterisk review. Anyone remember Dragonmancer? Anyone know? Probably not on this channel, but I will link the video below. But what if instead of, say, Dragonmancer, he had his own Asterisk? Oh, you are going to love this one, Red. Happy birthday, dude. And let's get started with the stats, because those are the first thing that I want to talk about. HP and MP are both B. They make sense to be B. Just overall average, above average, but not too much. Even for a knight, it just makes sense. The P attack, on the other hand, is an S, while the P defense is an A. Your defenses are quite strong, and you have very few times been bent to yield. Bent to yield? You get what I mean. Magic attack is a D, however, this'll make much more sense later. And magic defense is a C. Res power is an E. There is no recovering. And speed, look, we all know that it can take quite a while for your videos to come out, man. I'm being generous here and giving you a D. It should be an E, but I'm giving you a D. But now, I want to talk about the overview of the Tyrant Asterisk. The Tyrant's specialty is as a devastatingly powerful sword user who utilizes dark magics to ascend their skills to horrifying levels, decimating foes in their wake. The recommended abilities use the Tyrant's enhancement skills to increase the damage output of the other physical and magical skills. Doing this on a more generic background doesn't make too much sense. Before we continue, to quote one of the best written villains in anything, I hope you don't mind if I borrow your plaything for a little. Alright, now that we have that set up, it's back to here. It's always lovely to see this background again. But with that truly out of the way, we have our first actual ability. Ponder. A magic skill. The user ponders upon the enemies and their weaknesses and strength, gaining a 10% resistance for each resistance they have, and a 10% buff for all elemental damage that is of the weaknesses of all monsters on the screen for 3 turns. Yeah, misspeaks. Yeah, keeping it in the record though. This effect can stack up to 3 times. It costs 20 MP, and there is a little bit of an extra note here. If an enemy has no weaknesses, you just gain a 5% damage down for 2 turns. If they have no resistances, you take 5% more damage for 2 turns. You have to play your cards very carefully when you ponder. However, the next ability is very, well, clear-cut. Terrible pun, I know. Paper Slash. The user manifests their weapon into paper, creating an origami sword that sheens as if it were real metal, and slashes at an opponent, dealing light damage to it. It's only 5 MP, very basic slash attack that's stronger, presumably, than your basic attack. And for early on, it'll help a lot at level 2 for a job. Then we get into some truly crazy stuff. Tyrant's Insight is the first passive. Whenever the user succeeds in hitting a weakness using a skill, the next use of the same skill will be twice as effective. The effect lasts upon using it again, but it will not increase in its strength. It is a permanent double damage for as long as you're spamming that skill. And I hope that you like what's coming up, because it's only going to get crazier. Tyrant's Wave. The user swings their weapon effortlessly, summoning a wave of dark, corrupted water, dealing moderate damage of both water and dark damage. 30 MP. However, if one element is resisted, the damage is cut by 25%. If both are, however, that's a 75% resist. You just lose so much damage if they resist both. You have to play your cards carefully with this one, but it's also a good AoE attack. Then there's Tyrant's Scorch. The user readies their weapon to their mouth before releasing a massive blaze of dark flames, dealing moderate damage of both fire and dark. Again, 30 MP, and again the same risk reward. You have to be careful with Tyrant's Wave and Tyrant's Scorch. These two abilities are one and the same in that they are meant to target weaknesses and are countered by resistances hard. Then we have our next ability, Tyrant's Rant. The user focuses their mind on one of 3 elements of their choosing, increasing all attacks of that damage type by 30% for 3 turns. Of course, the 3 elements are water, fire, and dark. The effect stacks 2 times. However, subsequent uses after the first one do not reset the timer of the buff. Meaning, if you use this twice, you only have 1 turn left before it runs out, really. So you have to play this very carefully. Costs 50 MP as well, so it's a very much lock-in sort of skill. The next one, and one of the favorites of mine for me to create for you, was Nova Slash. Again, another 50 MP cost, but when we get into the description, it becomes apparent why. The user channels pure darkness into their weapon, sweeping darkness across the battlefield, dealing heavy dark damage to one enemy of the user's choosing, and light dark damage to the rest of the enemies on the field. Already, just from that alone, combined with what we've talked about, you're starting to see why the magic scaling was so low. If it was any higher, you would be decimating. However, then we go into something that could make it decimate regardless. Lore of the Tyrant is another passive. Every time the user kills an enemy, they deal 1% damage extra to that specific enemy in all subsequent battles, up to 25%. If it's a unique enemy or boss or whatnot, however, even if they do respawn or are refightable, it will not trigger for them. So, say, for instance, oh hey, the portal fights from the end of Bravely Default 2 that you can access. These would not work for them. This would be an exemption from them. But then we start getting into the buff skills. Ocean's Tyrant, another physical skill. The user morphs their weapon into a blade of hardened water before slashing at one enemy of their choosing, dealing heavy water damage to them and light water damage to all others. 40 MP. As you can tell, this is Nova Slash, but for water. And it is definitely not as targeted, but not being dark just brings the MP cost down a teensy bit, so it actually is more effective, especially considering stuff we'll get later. Then we have Magma's Tyrant, which is more of the same. The user morphs their weapon into a blade of molten magma before piercing into one enemy of their choosing, dealing heavy fire damage to them and light to all the rest. We have a very balanced set of 3 elements that we are focusing on here, and we are not going to go past them. However, the next ability here is quite the effective one, and quite the scary one as well if you're trying to preserve your HP. A magic skill that costs 2000 HP instead of any MP. Tyrant's Effect. The user peers into themselves and channels their memories into a protective ward that gives 30% physical and magical resistance to all weapons and elements for 3 turns. If the user is hit for more than 2000 damage while this effect is up, however, all magical skills, aside from Ponder, will become locked until the end of the effect. You are creating a bubble that if it pops, you now are just locked out of all of your magical abilities. And while you do have some strong physical stuff here and there, the majority of your kit is magical. And you don't want the magical side of your kit to be locked. Especially since we're now getting to the next magical skill, Dark Prayer. The user sings a prayer to a dark god, unleashing their inner chaos and enhancing dark attacks by 50% at the cost of making them take 35% more damage for 5 whole turns. It costs 80 MP and is very risky. This is where the Tyrant's kit should end, but hold on, I think we need another arena change. Hold on. Also, music change with it before I... it's good to be back here. But with us coming back here, we have the 3 final skills. The most direct and referential skills, and easily the strongest. Just like in Bravely Default 2, these are the bonus skills. First, we have Praying Blade, another magical skill, costing 80 MP. The user channels a dark prayer into their weapon, imbuing it with immense dark energy. The next physical attack done while this effect is up will deal severe dark damage to the enemy. The effect ends upon hitting an enemy. If the physical attack done would have already done dark damage, the dark damage would be added on to the damage hitting the initial target on the physical skill. So you remember that Nova Slash, huh? What if we just said, oh hey, for the low cost of 130 MP, sorry I miscounted my math in my head, but for the low cost of 130 MP, you could make your Nova Slash all of a sudden just deal so much damage that it essentially nukes. Now we're getting in the true endgame territory. And the music kicking up should only emphasize that. But what emphasizes that more than anything else, is the names and the effects of the final two skills. First, a passive. Providence of a Tyrant. All dark skills that cost MP now cost 1000 HP, and as consequence, deal 3 times as much damage. All water skills and fire skills that cost MP now are 750 HP and deal twice as much. It costs 3 ability points to slot in, but it is a very strong passive for the endgame. And combined with what we just went over with stuff like Praying Blade, I'm pretty sure you could become some sort of dark god with this. Something, hit them all, and anyways, the final one, however, the true Illuminati pyramid on top of it all, is Providence of Truth, a magical ability that costs all your HP, leaving you at 1, and half your current HP. Or MP, sorry. The user reveals the truth of darkness, summoning forth the energies of the moon and of the failings of men past and present, to channel one final attack with their weapon, dealing massive dark, water, and fire damage to all enemies and allies, ignoring resistances. While it does leave you at 1 HP, it also locks all skills but Ponder for 2 turns. The damage of this skill, on top of that, is increased by the more MP and HP you had upon using it. Meaning if you had gotten your HP and MP stats high enough before you used this, and you had properly buffed up as well, this could deal, theoretically, so much damage that if we were to uncap it fully, you could probably kill the secret boss of Bravely Default 2 in 1 hit. And considering the video reference that I'm making to a certain one you made, that is so hard-hitting and was so negatively received by so many people in spite of touting the truth, I had to do this. And with that, your asterisk has been made, my friend. Happy 27th birthday. Hope you have a good one. Hope you are having a great week. Hope just the best for you. You're a great friend, and I can't wait to see what else comes from you. Peace. Also, like, share, comment, subscribe, all that.